answering another question off the Facebook page. This one is about efficient training for a vertical jump. And what's the best way to train vertical jump explosiveness in under 2 hours a day? Which actually 2 hours is quite a bit of time, all things considered. If you were to look at the training habits of elite track and field athletes, um, or even like a collegiate level, Division One collegiate, most of them do probably take between 1 and 3 hours for their workouts. Granted, there's a lot of probably skipping or swapping around between like time between the track workout and weights or whatnot. But ultimately, 2 hours is quite a long time to work out. So I guess I'll answer this in a way of how do I arrange my training for maximal efficiency? Like, what if I only had 2 hours in a whole week to work out as opposed to 2 hours a day? How would I arrange my training to get the maximal efficient benefit out of it? And this being for a vertical jump. So I would say there's three real principles you want to keep in mind in this case. One is intensity. So if I have a limited time to train, I want to focus my efforts on something of high training intensity. The only time where this may not play to your advantage is if you are, let's say, out of shape, or your body weight's above a little bit where it needs to be. Then obviously you're gonna need more training time to get that in the right range, and also elasticity. Maintaining the kind of like the elastic nature of human movement does take some more than others, but it can take like a fair amount of work to kind of achieve that like vertical stiffness in sprinting and especially jumping. So those are two things that can sap up a little more time. If you're already on a good level there, you don't need to address them quite as much, and some athletes can get away with not necessarily addressing those things. So those are the two things that do kind of take up a little bit more time. That and technique, like if you're training for track and field, a lot of the time in a weekly training is spent on technical aspects of those jumps, but those jumps are actually quite a bit more technical than a jump in the context of team sports. So there's another reason that training time is used. So intensity is the first thing. You want to make sure you're training with a very high intensity, and that you want to make sure that the training is very specific to what you're doing. So obviously these are very well-known training philosophies to just about anybody. Something that might be, less approached is rotating the specific fatigue from the high intensity training sessions. So what you would probably want to do would be to train, pick some very relevant high intensity type of exercise work. So maybe maximal jumping efforts, maximal sprinting efforts, relevant plyometric maximal efforts, so depth jumps and bounding, and very like similar type things. Maybe even some explosive medicine ball or shot put throws. So take explosive specific stuff, make it very intense, maximal, okay, and then kind of rotate. You want to rotate those exercises around. So maybe day one, I'm doing max jumps, focusing on max jumps, sprinkling some plyos. Day two, focus on plyos, sprinkling some max jumps or sprints. Day three, focus on sprints. And then, as kind of a backdrop, you probably would want to have strength as the backdrop. So doing maybe like a power to the people style or lift to day style program where you aren't really doing more than 10 reps and a couple relevant lifts, squat and deadlift. So 3 sets of 3, 2 sets of 5 at under 80%, so that doesn't draw away from the adaptation reserves that you need to keep pushing that speed barrier in your jumping and sprinting. That's an efficient way to do it. Okay, and that's a way you can pull it off in minimal time. Quick anecdote, or a couple anecdotes of efficient training. When I was young, 16, 17 years old, I trained on a 3-day setup where I would one day a week. Monday was typically my big depth jump plyos day, and I would do heavy depth jumps, high depth jumps, plyometrics, bounding for about 40 minutes, 30-40 minute workout. And then I go hit some deadlifts, like 4 sets of 6 or 8. I preferred sumo at the time, just because it seemed to work my hips more and my back less. So I used that. And Thursday was my pickup basketball day, but I always did a bunch of dunks, try to get a lot of dunks, a lot of max effort work. And like Friday or Saturday, I do some hard all-out sprints. So each of those, basically 3 days a week. The other days I'd shoot around or, kind of practice my skills or whatnot. I was very light at the time. My movement ability was pretty good. Elasticity was pretty good. So that worked really well for me. I think in that time period I put about at least I would say between 3 and 5 inches on my 1 and 2 leg jumps. So it was very effective, very useful. And you know, I've been through a lot of different training programs before. Granted, not good ones, but that was a kind of rotating system that worked well for me. On top of that, I've made a couple similar programs using rotating kind of the big elements of training on a 3-day rollover scale, and they've had great results from it as well. And some of which, you know, I have one athlete in particular who only trains twice a week, rotating 3 basically jumping days or styles of jumping days that I have given to him, and he's gotten great results from that. But not everyone can train that way. That you're going to need a high caliber athlete who can handle training extremely specifically and not really doing any relevant lifting or even plyometric work. So I hope that answers your question at least a little bit in a way that you can make training very efficient. Again, focus on specifics, focus on high intensity work, and focus on rotating different fatigue elements from things like sprinting and jumping. And also, didn't intend to have a plug necessarily, but I do have a book on that topic actually coming out pretty soon. Not a really long one, but one that's long enough to cover the theory and methodology, as well as some real practical setups that you can use for very efficient ways to manage and rotate specific fatigue in light of vertical jumping. But granted, you could probably use it for just about any kind of explosive team-based athletic endeavor. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Good luck with your keeping your training efficient, and that's all.